It's Bart, and welcome to another episode of Soccer for Us. We have a USMNT roster drop this week, but before we get into the ins and outs, or who is in and out of that roster, we're going to talk about a couple other things surrounding US Soccer and the USMNT program. So, to talk about those things are tonight the man who is the greatest historian on USMNT Twitter. It is Thomas, aka US Keeper. Thomas, how has it been? How is the progress of coaching up the next Alex Morgan / also the next Lindsay Heap / also the next Shannon Box? I feel like you've got quite the combo up there.
It's going well. One season's just ended. The other one is kind of starting up. Tournament this weekend. Small little thing, so it'll be good. Yeah, it's exciting to have kind of one more outdoor thing before you get stuck inside for the next 6 months. Because in New England, it's very challenging to get your outdoor time through the winter months. But she had a great season. So proud of her, all the work she did, playing up with the older kids, and just leading scorer. Did played a lot of different key roles. So super proud of her. So excited for it to end, but also excited for the next club stuff to start up too a little bit. So.
I love to hear that. And also joining us, he may not be the leading goal scorer, but he is the leading card giver in Northwest Mississippi. It is
me.
Lawrence Dockery, aka LDoc93. The season's coming to end. I'm getting all those tournament emails right now as a referee, and I'm like, y'all can't all host a tournament on the same weekend and expect referees to show up for you.
Now, I will say, in my defense, of the 3 Mississippi referees that went to Southern President's Cup regionals in Plano this summer, I'm the only one of the 3 that did not send anybody off. So that's in my defense. That's a counterpoint to last year when I had the first send off of the event.
Hey, he's learned how to manage the game, folks.
I hit the ground running. Yeah, that's just I'm about done refereeing outside for the season. I've decided to start refereeing indoor for the first time in 15 years, and I had that for the first time this week, and I mean it was gravy money. I didn't really have to do anything. It's the rec indoor season, and it's just kids, and so I don't have to deal with adults trying to prove how awesome they are at 50. That comes in January, but right now it is what it is.
It is. I know it's actually nice to have those indoor or adult seasons once the youth season is over to tide you over. Let's get into it because we have some topics to talk about on this episode. I mentioned that we have a roster dropping. We're recording Wednesday night. The roster is supposed to drop Thursday morning sometime. So we'll talk about that next week because, as we have discussed, inevitably someone will get hurt who is on this roster, or some change will be made, and we'll talk about that after that happens. So on this episode, we're talking about the U.S. women's 3 friendlies in October. We're talking about a story from ESPN about how the U.S. soccer higher-ups make decisions on where and when and who games are played against. And then final closing out with some news from The Athletic that the USMNT will no longer have a January camp, but will probably still have a camp Cupcake. So that is our talking discussion points today. So let's talk USWNT. They played 3 matches at the end of October. They had a 2-1 loss to Portugal, a 3-1 win in that rematch, and then a 6-0 blowout of New Zealand. Emma Hayes called a very young roster. A lot of new faces, a lot of returning new faces, I think is also fair to say. But it's kind of nice getting used to, Thomas, a new wave of women USWNT talent that, I think, at least with the Portugal friendlies, we got real competition to kind of evaluate them in.
I mean, I was happy to, Jane Shaw for me is one of those players. I know she's kind of struggled a little bit, but again, she's 20, and to see her come back with the national team along with many other young players, right? So it's a real blessing. There's so many to have this much young talent that you can pull into squads. I mean, I look at it and say, why don't the men, the men have had this in the past, but you're looking at half this squad that are in their they're teenagers in their early 20s. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, it's so I don't know. It kind of blows me away because they just continue rolling out the talent on this, and you look at some of these players like, oh yeah, Olivia Moultrie, Jane Shaw, Alyssa Thompson. I mean, Alyssa Thompson's 20 years old. Everyone, she's 20 years old.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's huge, right? I mean, you're talking players that are impacting this team, and they're going to be doing it for a decade at least, going forward. So it's a good problem to have, and to see a different group come in. Around there's some injuries in general, and Emma Hayes is just doing the right things, getting the right matches set up, heading into I think qualifying is what next
end of next year,
end of next year. So about a year from now, they'll have the I believe it's a tournament that unless something changes.
Yeah, we can't have a whole qualification process for them, and that would be too logical.
Yeah, I'd love to see it. But yeah, so they'll have in about a year they'll have that tournament, and I'm assuming we'll see some familiar faces come back into the squad that we've been longing to see as they're raising their newborns. So it's it was a fun camp to see some of these younger faces come back into camp and some new ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Lawrence, we obviously know there are a couple of injuries, plus a couple of our best players are pregnant and growing babies, so good for them, but they're not here. But it also feels like this is a stark change from what the women's program has had in the past, where and I get it, winning was the priority, right? You had to go find your best 23 players to fill out a roster and field the team for every match, because you were measured on, hey, are you good or not? Because if you weren't winning, you were perceived as not good, and therefore under scrutiny of, I mean, literally, should we even be doing this? The fact that we are at a point where Emma Hayes can actually explore the depths of the player pool feels like, as Thomas said, it's the right thing to do, but it's nice that we're at a point where no one's freaking out truly about the Portugal loss in the first game. When we go, well, okay, but what's the goal of these matches that we're playing?
Yeah, and it's first and foremost, Emma Hayes gets the benefit of the doubt, as she should. She was probably the best women's manager in the world when they brought her in, and has done nothing in that time to make me question whether she's still the best women's manager in the world. I mean, she had one major tournament and won it at the Olympics in Paris last year. So you also look at the women's calendar being just a little bit different than the men's calendar, and that the two biggest events that you have as a women's national team are in back-to-back years. And then I'm sorry, I don't count the She Believes Cup as anything super special or important. It's expensive friendlies is what it is. So there's no, I mean, I guess they had the Women's Gold Cup, and I guess that was the inaugural edition of that, and I'm sure that'll get bigger as time goes on.
That was somehow also played during Olympic year, which made no sense either. But
but if you think about it, from the Olympics until the World Cup qualifying tournament, instead of just an actual qualification process, you've got essentially nothing, and this is the perfect time to be doing what Emma Hayes is doing and looking at the larger player pool, because that's you mentioned it, and that is something that it got a little bit stale under Jill Ellis, but it ended up not mattering because she won her 2 Women's World Cups. And I think it really got stale and boring under Vlatko, where it was just like, let's bring the same 23 players in every camp. Let's beat everybody 6-0. We're not learning anything. We're not improving. We're not discovering new talent. And then you go out and show your ass at the Olympics in Tokyo. And then you go out and really show your ass at the Women's World Cup in New Zealand. So combination of the schedule where you have the time to do it and a manager that's going to get the benefit of the doubt. This was a fine window. I also think it's interesting that this is 2 years in a row now where there's been nothing in the September window, and then you've had a 3-game October window. I don't know if that's just the way that it worked out, or if that's a conscious decision. I have to imagine the fact that they've done it that way 2 years in a row with nothing and then 3 games each time leads me to believe that it's conscious. I don't know why. I don't really have an opinion on that
This is the
one way or
first
the
year
other.
FIFA actually changed their calendar. So we didn't have anything in September for the window for the women. And remember, this is what the men are about to do, is they're going to push back that September window. And so this window was purposely longer so that the women's side could have 3 friendlies. I personally like it. I will say I think that's actually one of my big takeaways is I understand we may have to like not have as many windows, but having 3 in a row is kind of nice because you can really get time as a coach. Like you're really getting time with the players. But it also, to me, to your point, was like I'm going to talk about this loss because I felt angry that we lost, but I went, okay, well these are fixable. It's just a matter of like play a little bit quicker, be a little sharper in possession, and I think Emma Hayes talked specifically about they were not adapting to Portugal's formation quick enough. So for me, I'm looking at it going, okay, yeah, those are problems, right? But that is a problem that Emma can work with now that she's seen it in a 3-game window. Okay, well now we have 2 games to correct it. So that to me is another thing where I'm like, okay, yes, the Portugal loss was bad. We come back and beat them 3-1. You know, I don't know, Thomas. What do you think really went wrong in that loss? Because I think for me it was just that they were untidy, but maybe it was a little bit deeper than that.
I mean, I'm watching. I'm like, there's no energy. There's there's nothing to play for. Like, I mean, again, that was probably the more, senior, group of players out there, right? And that gets hard, right? When you do have a disjointed cycle, right? You have it's the World Cup is at at the end, and then the following year is the Olympics, as we just mentioned, and that's tough, right? There's no real something to play for. It's hard to build into it a little bit. You're playing these matches. It's at the end of the year. NWSL is heading to the playoffs. You know what I mean? There's just a lot of just like, I don't know, undesired type of certain play in general. So I just didn't see a lot of urgency or energy from that group out there, and when I was watching it.
I mean, yeah, that's fair. I think kind of to Thomas's or to Lawrence's point, that staleness does creep in when you kind of know what the rhythm is of the cycle. And an October window, 2 years out from a World Cup, I mean, I hate to say it, but the stakes are just very low. They just are. But as we change over to the next 2 games where you get younger talent in there, well, the energy picks up, as you kind of point out, Tom. I mean, it felt like they were, oh, I got to prove something, which is interesting. I mean, I'm not. Portugal had a bad women's Euro. For some reason, they can't tend to play really well against us. Obviously, they got a draw against us in the 2023 World Cup, and I remember that game.
Almost won that game.
I was there. Man, shot off the post.
Is that the one where the ball hit the post in stoppage time?
Yeah. That was going on about 130 yards away from me, and I was scared and cold in Auckland, but scared.
That's right. It's winter down there. I forgot that.
It was winter down there. Yeah, it was actually warmer than when we were in Wellington because Auckland is more north, therefore it's closer to the equator, and it was a little bit more mild as opposed to Auckland or Wellington, which was just cold and wet. But yeah, the next 2 games looked better, and it just seemed like there's a little bit more energy. Who stood out for you in this window? Lawrence, did you have anyone who were like, hey, this is someone who I have my eyes on going forward?
Not especially, no. I mean,
Okay.
you look, a lot of the players are that I guess you could say stood out are already known quantities. I guess Emma Sears kind of was new to the team last year, and so you want to see how a player who achieved at a high level last year, are they going to be able to maintain that on a game-to-game, year-to-year, camp-to-camp basis? And I think it was the New Zealand game where she scored a hat trick, if I'm right. So I mean, but Rose Lavelle got a couple of goals, but what you're going to get with Rose Lavelle. She's been around this team for a decade now, and she's got 100+ caps, and nobody really, in a good way or a bad way, and I think it just comes with where we are in the cycle.
Okay.
We're a year plus removed from the last Olympics. We're 2 years away from the next World Cup. It's kind of the doldrums, and you're just, I don't want to say going through the motions, because I think that's what happened in the first game and they lost. And I guess it's nice to see that they bounced back and got 2 wins in those next 2 games, almost like a wake up call, so to speak.
It's hard to call it that, but yeah, it's like, okay, yes, Portugal beat us.
But no, like, just between where we are in the cycle and who the goal scorers ended up being, nobody really stood out good or bad. It's just they went out there and they played, and the camp's over now.
Thomas, anyone who you were like, man, that's someone who I can't wait to see in November/December, because it's on December 1st.
Yeah, I mean, to me, Moultrie, I mean, she had a couple goals in there. It's good to see her come back. She had injury issues when she, after she first arrived. Again, she's 20 years old, right? So to me, seeing the young players go out there and perform, I mean, that was, in the Portugal game that she did that, and I thought that was just nice to see, right? As far as other players contributing, having that balanced scoring, options, right? It's because I was talking this with my daughter. I'm like, who is going to be that player? Who's going to take and be that next great scorer for these women team? I don't have an answer for it. I mean, as far as the younger players go, right? I mean, if you're looking at the, a player that's in, teenager to early 20s, I don't know who that player is going to be right now. Because there's a lot of good ones, but is someone going to take hold of that and be able to score 100 goals? I don't know if that's, how it's constructed anymore, because of, they're not going to be playing as many games as they had in years and cycles past. But to me, that's interesting to follow. And they have a lot of players who can finish. So I think that's, again, a good problem to have.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned, Lawrence mentioned the Misters. I think Katarina Macario also had a pretty darn good camp overall. Those are those 23 to 25-year-old players that, like, you kind of have to have in a World Cup squad. By the World Cup, they'll be around 26. Like, you have to have those mid-20s players who are at their best, because those are the ones who, physically speaking, their bodies can take it, but they're also elevated enough to be able to take not just the running every other, every 3 days, but also the physical toll that you take when you're playing soccer like that. Moultrie being very young is interesting. Johannes, who else was, Thompson was a young one out there. Jordan Bug, who I was super impressed with. Those are very young players that I'm glad they're performing well in games like these, because I think Portugal, much better opponent than New Zealand, but still not like. And this, I know they tied us and beat us in the last 3 times we played them, but like, not the, oh crap, I'm super worried with this team. This is not a Brazil. This is not even, the Sweden or even something like that, right? These are still lower second tier, if you will, teams. Looked good. That team is like, hey, we accomplished something in that regard. Does that make sense?
Yeah, one thing about you mentioned New Zealand, and and everything you said does make sense to me. It's, if you, as young new players, can't perform in such a low stakes environment, how can we expect you to perform in a much higher stakes environment, like a World Cup qualifying tournament, or a World Cup or Olympics, or tournaments of that nature, or even friendlies against the elite European teams. One thing that, when you mentioned New Zealand just now, mentioned Portugal being better than New Zealand, like, a lot of the discourse the last several years around the women's national team is how the rest of the world is catching up to the U.S. because we had this massive head start, because we are one of the few countries in the world that women's sports are taken seriously. And now the rest of the world is catching up to that. I think it's gone way under the radar how I think a lot of the rest of the world has kind of passed New Zealand. Like, New Zealand was always one of those countries that they maybe didn't take it like as seriously as we did, but they had a head, not the kind of head start that we had, but they had a very large head start on a lot of these other countries, and they've kind of stagnated or regressed. And not that they were ever a huge challenge for the U.S. women's team, but that was always a team that you saw at the World Cup or the Olympics, and they would go to the knockout rounds. And man, they just, I wonder if they need to. I mean, and it's a very small country, so who knows what the after effects of hosting the Women's World Cup will be. We won't know that for another 10 years or so. But I think, there's a lot of talk about the world catching up to the U.S. women, and I don't think enough talk about how maybe the rest of the world has kind of passed some of those other teams that we always just kind of penciled in.
See also Norway, by the way, who has been not great for a couple decades now.
They ran it. It was us and them in the 90s.
Yeah.
And China.
China is another one. Yeah. I do want to take a moment because this feeds into our next discussion. The U.S. women decided to play at CKPC Stadium in St. Louis, in Kansas City, Missouri, not Kansas City, Kansas, where a lot of these games traditionally would have been played. This is a purpose-built stadium for women's professional soccer. They claim it's the first one, but I also remember being at the opening of Fifth Third Bank Stadium in Kennesaw, Georgia, which was built specifically for the Atlanta Beat and the Kennesaw State Owls women's soccer program. So I don't know, y'all call it what it is. Good for them. But 12,500 seats, the third game in an October window. I think this is a good thing. This is second year in a row that I think U.S. soccer has purposefully chosen a strong women's soccer market to play this game in. Last year, if you want to say the exact same fixture, was in Louisville.
I was there.
That to me, yes, you were. That to me is a good thing. It's hard. Oh, okay, we're getting into. It's hard to justify playing a real friendly, right, in a stadium that holds less than 15,000, because at that point you kind of are signaling like this isn't that big of a deal. But at the same time, it is rewarding really good soccer markets in this country, and you pack out the stadium, it still looks darn good, and it's like, sure, you could have probably played this in the 18,000 seater or 19,000 seater, I guess, across the river and sold it out, or maybe sold more tickets. But this feels like a better celebration of the game than, 3/4 full stadium, on a Wednesday night.
Yeah, that's something. When they opened that stadium 2 years ago, I want to say.
I think we're at 2 years, yeah.
And in one of the group chats I'm in with a bunch of other soccer reporters from around the country, I was like, do we think that the next time the women's team goes to Kansas City that they're going to play in this new women's soccer stadium, or are they going to just stick with Children's Mercy Park? And the consensus was that U.S. soccer, liking money the way that they do, was going to stick with Children's Mercy Park because they usually sell that place out, and not, they announce the sellout and you look and you're like, but not like, it's a full house. And when they don't sell it out, it's only off by a couple of hundred, maybe 1,000 seats. Yeah. So I was surprised from a financial standpoint, I guess, but I understand the symbolism of it, right? And I think that's what this was more of a symbolic thing rather than a monetary or any other kind of decision. Because Lord knows, Sporting Kansas City's season's been done because they are stinky. But there's nothing wrong with it. I would have preferred a bigger number. So I would have played in the larger stadium, and it's not like, that's a fantastic facility. It's hosted Copa America, Gold Cup, Club World Cup, you name it. Well, actually, I don't know. It didn't host any Club World Cup. Forget I said that. But all in all, for one game, and like you mentioned, the Louisville game last year, I don't think anybody, as much as we yell and scream and cry about wanting a wider variety of stadium selection, it's Kansas City. Like, it's a market you've been to 100 bazillion times. I guess you can hang your hat that it was a different stadium, so I'm not going to be too mad about it. But like the Louisville game last year, it's It's a different place. That it's a good Louisville's a good soccer market. Louisville City is one of the top 4 attended teams in the USL Championship every single year. Racing
Didn't matter
Louisville,
against Detroit City, did it?
Yeah, no, it didn't. Racing Louisville, not so much on the attendance front in the NWSL, but that's what the U.S. men's national team used to do that all the time. If there was an MLS team that attendance was down, they'd throw a national team game your way to kind of try to drum up a little bit of extra interest, and I think that's maybe what they tried to do in Louisville. I didn't mind because they had to add extra bleachers. And so it was the second largest crowd in the history of the stadium. And that meant that I got to go cover it. And I didn't even have to drive that far because I drove from here to Nashville for game 2 of that window and then drove from Nashville to Louisville for game 3. And I got family there, so I didn't have to get a hotel or anything. I also got to do the match day -1 press conference, which I've never gotten to do before. So all in all, I didn't have a problem with them playing it at the new stadium, but I would suspect that maybe in the future, if they're looking for a return to Kansas City, I think they'll probably go back to Children's Mercy Park. And I think not tonight, but the most recent game was, more symbolic than anything else.
Well, we'll talk more about the stadium selection discussion in just a second. We're going to take the slightest bit of a break and come back and talk about this ESPN story with Jeff Kassouf. All right. Well, we talked about our women's national team and the new stadium they broke in the October window. Now let's talk about Jeff Kassouf's article for ESPN talking about the way that the U.S. soccer decision makers choose not just the opponent, but also the site and stadium location for these friendlies. It is interesting. We have talked about this on this particular show a lot. It's something that I think anyone who I've had on here cares about because we all kind of, I think our thesis or our wish maybe is that more people in this country get to watch our national teams play soccer. I think that is all of our goal. And maybe the thesis is if more people in this country have the opportunity to watch the national team up close and in person, they will more likely be a passionate and connected fan. I think that is, the summary of what we believe. So Jeff Kassouf wrote this article kind of breaking down why it is interesting. I think we just talked about this is the second year in a row that we played in a new stadium. Worth noting, the U.S. men's national team played in a new stadium in San Antonio, 2 years ago now for that last Camp Cupcake. But still, I think it's fair to say we have our rights with U.S. soccer and that they do not have a broad enough view of the soccer landscape in this country. Feels like they default to the same cities and stadiums for their friendlies. We certainly know that CONCACAF does that. Thomas, you're the one who brought this article to my attention. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what Jeff kind of reported, but then what you make of the way that U.S. soccer decision makers kind of positioned their thought process.
So I think it was like 3 to 5 years ago, the Washington Post had an article similar to this. I think this has a lot more detail, but there's still holes in this. Admittedly, I mean, they'll admit that in the article, kind of going through the process of selecting sites and all these sorts of things in general. I think it's a little CYA that U.S. soccer likes to do with things from time to time. Just say, hey, yeah, we're doing these things, right? Like, here, look, like, and this is what we're doing. But then they're not really providing full transparency with some of the decision-making pieces here. All I'll say about this is that we've known since what? I just had it. I think it's June of 2018 that the U.S. is going to host a World Cup. So you've had plenty of time to line up different venues, to line up all these different things. I get the challenges. I get it, right? I understand the challenges of setting up some of these sorts of things. And look, I live on the East Coast. I'm fine with East Coast games, right? And I get logistically why that is. So some of these things are common sense, in general, in terms of logistics for travel for clubs from Europe, South American teams. I mean, we have, different challenges. I get to do that, but they've had plenty of time to be able to lay the groundwork of saying, hey, here's 5 venues that we're going to shoot for that are different, that are new, and figure out how to do that. I mean, they provided some great detail of some of the costs, within, renting the stadiums and I think that's interesting stuff. But to me, like, you've had plenty of runway to be able to do this. You've known for a while it's happening, and you didn't do anything, in my opinion, to really pinpoint that. I mean, you had it's their friendlies, right? They're not qualifiers. You want to be comfortable with qualifiers, fine, whatever. I'm not going to argue that. I want the best opportunity for the U.S. to win. But when you look at some of the logistical pieces, that are they're breaking down in here. I mean, of course, coaches are going to have opinions on who they play, but we have scheduling issues, right? The Nations League in Europe limits how many times you can play those nations. So we end up playing a lot of South American nations, right? And we're seeing a few more Asian and African nations that are being, included, but that's leading up to a World Cup on our home soil. So they want to play here. So it's a little frustrating to me. And I'm sure it is to both of you, because it's definitely a topic that we've, are passionate about and talked about a lot. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there. There's a lot of, covering their own, their own butts in terms of saying we're doing everything we can, but.
Yeah, and that's to me, it sounded like it was one of those where, and that's why I'm surprised this came from Jeff Kassouf and not somebody else, because a lot of this was them saying, "Oh, we're trying, but it's so hard, we can't do it, it's so hard." Like, shut the hell up. Okay, like, stop. I understand that there are some. There's factors, obviously, especially during the fall. I get that, but some of the stuff they put in here, I'm sorry, was asinine, and I really am confused as to why other countries get an opportunity to say where they play us in this country. That was stupid to me. Then when U.S. Soccer says, well, during World Cup qualifying, we're not giving up home field advantage. Nobody's asking you to. Nobody has any problem playing Mexico and Ohio in November and December. Yeah. No, nobody has ever questioned that.
The only time
we ever griped about
that. The only time I griped about that was playing in St. Paul, Minnesota in February, because it wasn't advantageous to anybody.
Yeah, and players ended up in the hospital after that game.
Yeah. That was the only time we actually complained about that.
And also, I loathe Fox Sports. I loathe them, and the way they tried to spin that game as like Snow Classico 2.0. Like, no. Yes, the snow was cold and Minnesota was cold. That's where the similarities end. But so nobody's asking you to give up home field advantage during World Cup qualifying, guys. How many World Cup qualifiers have we played this cycle? None. You know why? Because we're hosting the World Cup. So that allows you to have a little bit more latitude to go to more different places. I also like the line in there where they talk about the ticket prices. And they're like, you could have sat front row at the last game for $24. Bullshit. I can tell you from personal experience, the October 2023 friendly against Ghana in Nashville. Right? That's a 30,000 seat stadium, 30,109, Geodis Park. My wife wanted to go with me. I got her a ticket for the second from the top row of the stadium because it was the cheapest. It was a Tuesday night. The announced attendance was 18,000, so that's a little over half. I paid $89 for that ticket. I didn't get it from a reseller. I didn't get it from the black market. I didn't go to the dark web. I didn't get it from a dude on the street corner. I got it from U.S. Soccer's website, $89. Mm-hmm. So miss me with the, you can get cheap front row tickets, but we don't have any control over what happens after that. Stop. Lies.
Yeah.
So, I mean, was it a little bit interesting to hear about one or two of the things that they tried that didn't come off because somebody ended up having to go into a World Cup qualifying playoff? Yes, that was interesting. I like the fact that they were claiming. I'm always skeptical because when stuff is close to happening, it leaks
Mm-hmm.
through accident or
Mm-hmm.
on purpose. And there were no leaks about anybody playing a game at the baseball stadium in Seattle. So you can say that now that it's not happening. Go, well, this is what we were going to do, but we could. They went to a playoff. What are we supposed to do? Like nobody was reporting it, nobody was leaking it, nobody was talking about it. So that to me that puts my antenna up. That maybe you might just be making that up because
Yeah.
it's easy to say you were going to do something once it's obvious that you can't do it. Like, so that's there were one or two other things in there, and I've got it pulled up, and I'm just kind of skimming it right now. But it just came off as so much excuse making, and we know that U.S. Soccer is very aware of the gripes about stadium selection,
Mm-hmm.
and we know this because when they played Morocco in Cincinnati in 2022, it was the third time in Cincinnati since 2019, and like the sixth time in Ohio since 2019, and they tongue in cheek, haha, we know what you're saying, and we don't care, but they put up a tweet. Only our second ever appearance at TQL Stadium, and so like,
Yeah.
okay, you wouldn't be putting that up there if you didn't
Second
know
ever appearance in a
exactly
stadium
what
that was 3 years old. Like,
that's
come on now.
a year and a half old. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like this is they're very aware of what the gripes are, and they realize that maybe making fun of people isn't the way to go about handling it. So it is now we tried, but it's too hard. We tried, and I mean Italy didn't want to play in this city, so we can only play in this city because our opponent wants to play there. Like,
Which
do
also felt like it
we get
was.
like when the U.S. women's team goes to the Netherlands or they go to Germany, or when the men's team goes to England, do they call up the FA and go, "Hey, we really don't want to play at Wembley, but can we
Yeah.
play at at Villa Park or something like that?"
Yeah.
And I'm sure the FA would go, "No."
Yeah. It definitely. I feel for. Okay. I feel for them because I do think that they are juggling a lot of factors that I will say other federations necessarily deal with, right? I think to your point about the alleged game at T-Mobile Park, the baseball stadium in Seattle against Italy, and I'm like, that sounds really cool, but also that doesn't sound like a smart decision when you think you're getting a European opponent in December. So to me, I'm going, okay, but why was that the thought process? Um, because to me, I'm going,
That makes me think that it wasn't.
eh, right. So that's where I'm like, why? Well, why did you like if you're scheduling Canada or you're scheduling, I don't know, uh, South America
Australia,
teams
Japan, South
or
Korea,
yeah,
China.
yeah, any of the Asian teams, and I go, okay, I can see why we would play on the West Coast, but like I understand fully why we play European teams on the East Coast. I do agree with you that like why are they dictating it? But it's like, well, it's a friendly, and I can understand wanting to say, look, we don't really want to travel to the East to the West Coast from Italy. I totally understand it. But why was that the play? I mean, you couldn't have found another option on the East Coast. Like, what I'm saying? That makes sense. No, or try to find another opponent to play. I mean, you have some South American teams who are pretty darn decent. You could have not gotten like Chile and Paraguay to come up and say, "Hey, we'll play some friendlies up there." Like, I mean, I don't know. That to me is like, are you really thinking about the whole picture? I am also sympathetic to that. There are things that stadiums and host sites have to provide, right? That meet certain standards, right? You have training facilities for the teams. You have to have locker rooms for the teams. You have to have the training facility that also has a locker room for the team. Stadium demands, athletic training facility and medical facilities, and I get it. There's a host of things, bro. We live in the richest country in the world with a 20, 25, 30 plus cities that have all of these. Any city that has college, a university in it, has athletic facilities up to the standard of professional, like, like they just do. Have you ever been in a college facility? It's especially nowadays, unless it's a D3 school, they are up to the standard of a professional
Mhm.
team, especially a lot of European teams that I've seen. Um, I don't. I look. Obviously, if she believes Cup, you have to have locker rooms for 4 teams. Like, duh. That makes sense. 4 teams coming, you got to have the locker room space for it. But I'm with you. It just seems like they're excuses and ways out, as opposed to just like thinking ahead. And that to me is still the problem with you. It's like these friendlies don't pop out of nowhere. It's not like you go, oh shit, we got a host friendly next month. The FIFA calendar is published for each cycle.
Years.
We know what the calendar is until October, until 2030. So why aren't you thinking about this ahead of time? And I mean, look, first thing you would always want to do if I'm this is where I'm at. I know we all want to see us play in big football stadiums. We all agree. We would love that. That is a little bit harder, but you know this, and you can't look at some of their schedules and go, "Oh, okay. Well, we know we have friendlies these dates because we know what the dates are going to be." Is Lucas Oil Stadium available? Is Highmark Stadium in Buffalo available? Is even uh, is
Acrisure and
T-Mobile
Pittsburgh.
Park?
East
Yeah,
Coast.
yeah, is Heinz Field available? Excuse me, Acrisure Stadium. My bad.
Yeah.
But even still, if you look in West Coast, is T-Mobile Park available? Are those available? Possibly during these windows, and immediately get on that call and say, hey, look, March 2027, we have friendlies on these dates. What would you say of keeping that open for us so that we can host a match here March 2027? Or if that's too far in advance, March 2026. That to me just feels like they're not maximizing the information they've been given, and in my opinion, not maximizing the fact that people do want to host events there. I don't know. I I understood what they were where they were coming from in a lot of points, but I still just want to go. But can't you do this? And that's where I felt after reading this article, Thomas. It was like, all right, well, thanks for explaining to me why you don't do it as well as I think you should, and that sounds really bad.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of followed this article up with one of my own a little bit, kind of just kind of speaking a little bit to, because there are some nations that have, soccer only, international stadiums, and the United States is not one of them. And there had been talk about that, but logistically, I don't think you could ever really do that. But maybe with Atlanta, it's sounding like the March window, they're going to have 2 friendlies in Atlanta. And I think that's that.
Which
I mean,
I'm so glad they're finally going to Atlanta, but like the World Cup is next year. Why are you playing 2 games in the same stadium? I'm glad that they're
Because
playing
they're
Atlanta,
celebrating
but
the opening of their National Training Center, Lawrence.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
right, and I think that's
open
a
until
part
April,
of it.
by the way.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're trying. They're trying to maximize those sorts of things in general. And again, I think Atlanta makes sense for logistically for European teams to internationally to easily fly into an airport and be in, have training facilities and all these different things that we've kind of talked about in general. But when we look at this, like, the U.S. is, it's too big to have that sort of thing. I would have liked to have seen the adverse too of saying, hey, what are the United States requirements when we go to, because I mean, we have not played on the road very often. My understanding is we don't get any money.
We played in Mexico that time.
Right. But yeah.
That I think because the mayor of Jalisco or the governor or whoever the head of state for the who what that's the state. Like Mexico has states the same way that we have states.
The
If I'm
governor
not mistaken,
of
so I think it was
Jalisco,
the
or the
governor
mayor
of
of
Jalisco
Guadalajara, one of the two. Yeah,
was retiring, and that was like his big birthday blowout or something. And so FMF paid U.S. Soccer to go do that game, and we got our heads taken off.
Yeah, I think it's just rare in general. Like, I mean, my understanding is if we play in a, kind of a neutral site, like a lot of times, like from information I've received from U.S. Soccer, they don't get a lot of anything out of that, right? The other nation gets a little bit more of the pull in terms of attendance and those other things in general. So, but I would have liked to have seen that other adversely in terms of the challenges that we also deal with when we're scheduling them, if we happen. I mean, we just haven't played very many matches off home soil for the last couple cycles for one reason or another. So, to me, that the other piece that kind of stands out is a little bit of, again, I mentioned it briefly, is the kind of the financial piece. I have never heard that, the fees and the different bonuses that are built into that for
by
your
opponents,
opponent.
by the way.
Yeah, for the opponents, right? Like, that stuff's built into the U.S. contract, but to me, I'm kind of blown away by that. And again, I'd want to see what U.S. requirements are, right, for that when we're going to other countries. Because my understanding is we don't get a dime, right? We don't get anything for playing a road match over in Europe. It's deemed like an honor. Like, is it that hard to schedule
You're
matches
welcome
over here? Yeah, exactly. So to me, it very well may be true to me, but I just, and again, the wording of that, teams often, command an appearance fee. Well, I think I had heard from that many teams want to play against the U.S. in the U.S. leading to the World Cup. So while that might be true, the last several windows where we played different teams, I'm sure they are happy to play in the United States and to get that experience. So I'm not fully buying that.
Yeah. I have my questions about a lot of what they said. I will say that I just need to say this. I have worked with U.S. soccer people. I have met a lot of them. At no point do I think they are bad people or even incompetent to that regard. But I do think that U.S. soccer sometimes lacks the gumption to do different things or try different things. If it seems slightly hard, they're gonna not do it. And I would like to see that change a little bit. Speaking of changes, we're going to talk on the other side of a change in the U.S. men's national team's scheduling decisions in the future. So let's take a small break and be back after that. Oh, okay, welcome back. We just talked in the last episode, or the last block, I should say, about the way that U.S. soccer chooses who they play and where they play. And now we have a schedule change that has been reported that will probably affect that pretty greatly, but maybe it won't. And we're going to talk about how maybe this will affect or not affect the U.S. men's national team in the future. Paul Tenorio of The Athletic reported that U.S. soccer will not hold a January camp this upcoming year. So the January 2026 window will not be a camp. Now, this has been lovingly referred to as Camp Cupcake by fans. U.S. soccer does not allow you to call that, by the way. But they are no longer going to be playing the January camp. Now, they do believe, according to the reporting from Tenorio, they will have a December 2026 camp, with future camps likely to be held in the same month going forward. Quote, the U.S. men's national team staff felt a January camp was not as practical this year, with many of the top MLS players already identified and familiar with the team. Plus, many MLS teams will start their preseason camps in early January. So that is their reasoning not hosting a January 2026 camp. The question is, I think, is this a good or bad call? Because if we're taking them at their word, they go, look, we do not need this camp for player evaluation 6 months before a World Cup. I think I agree and disagree with that sentiment. So, Lawrence, this is a big shakeup. We've had a Camp Cupcake in January for a while. I do understand, though, why you're looking at it going, why do we need to do this 6 months before World Cup? However, I would also say, well, you probably should get some of your guys together 6 months before a World Cup.
Yeah, and that's where I'm at with this is Big picture, long term, it's whatever. It's fine. It's not the end of the world. It's not gonna, you're moving it a month, so you'll get guys you'll probably end up getting MLS guys that didn't go to the playoffs and have been not doing anything since the middle of October, and then in case you had any more questions about who really calls the shots at U.S. Soccer when MLS says too many of our players are starting preseason around, because that was one of the reasons that you had it and why you could only call in MLS players, is because when this first started, the MLS season didn't used to start until April, and now it's starting in the last week of February. So a January camp, was helped everybody stay in shape during a very, very long off season, and now that off season is much, much, much shorter. But anyway, big picture, not a huge deal to me, but for this year, this is one of the dumbest things you can do. You are hosting a World Cup. You have negative aura, as the kids like to say, around this team going into this World Cup. There are soccer people that don't know the World Cup is here next year, and you are voluntarily doing away with 2 chances to put your national team on TV and put it in probably the same, but possibly different sections of the country. That is stupid. If they had said January camp's happening this year, we're moving it to December in 27, 28, 29, okay, good job, U.S. Soccer. But you are hosting a World Cup, and you need to be doing everything possible. And I've been saying this for 3 years, and the fact that I've had to continue to say it means it's not getting done, to build up some damn juice around this team, because there is none.
Yeah.
You can. Cool, you sold out an 18,000 seat stadium in Denver. Awesome. What were your TV ratings? 168,000 people. Okay. So voluntarily doing away with 2 opportunities to lend yourself just a little bit more exposure, I think, is incredibly stupid.
That 100% is where I'm at, Lawrence. I think this is just a missed opportunity to play a game or 2 in a smaller market, but still a soccer market. I mean, I think the San Antonio example is a great example of San Antonio is a very large city. And yes, it's in Texas. Look, game is taking place in January. There's only a few states you can play it in, unless you're going to play it in a dome. I know players cannot possibly play soccer on turf. But this is a missed opportunity. Even if you were to play it in, Louisiana, right? Or play it in Arizona, or another, I don't know, play it
New
in
Mexico,
Alabama,
Alabama,
somewhere.
Arkansas.
That is a missed
South
opportunity.
Carolina.
It's also just a missed opportunity to put the national team on the TV 6 months before a World Cup, right? Because now we're taking away a window. I am wondering how HBO Sports, Turner, and all those people feel about this, by the way, because we know they also have some decision making in these decisions. They have some power in these decisions.
The ratings have sucked since they've moved away from ESPN and Fox into Turner. I don't think they've cracked 500,000 viewers once, and I think it was for the Germany game in 23.
I don't know.
We've had 2 Mexico games on Turner. One of them was like 300,000 viewers, and one of them was so bad there is no viewership figure.
Yep. So while maybe it doesn't feel like it's a missed opportunity, it just feels like these are opportunities that I don't know why you're taking away. Then there comes to the actual question of Thomas, like, on the field, what does this mean for the team?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Pochettino had been calling in quite a few MLS players over the last few windows, right? To take a look at into the Gold Cup and looking at different players, right? So it kind of had a feel of, okay, they're trying to prop up MLS a little. That's what it felt like for me. They're trying to prop up MLS and make these players seem relevant and say, hey, yeah, we're doing something here. And then slowly start to fizzle away a little bit in the last couple of windows, and we'll see what tomorrow's roster looks like. As far as that goes. And I think you're missing that opportunity to potentially do that. To me, again, it was weird. They pushed hard for it, and then now they're kind of pulling back from this. I mean, look, Klinsmann said it a long time ago. He hated this camp. Pochettino probably hates it too. It's probably not a huge value in general for the coaches. But I mean, we look at our goalkeeper situation, Turner and Freeze. Could they use the time? I mean, look, I'm going to still die on this hill about Freeze if he's the starter. He is not. He's played 11 matches, right? And that's it. And he's got 6 wins and 3 shutouts. And it's nothing, great in my opinion. He's done fine, but he's not wowed me. To me, it just gives him a couple more opportunities. Again against probably C-level international players, but it is odd to me a little bit as to that dynamic, because they were pulling in a lot more. And there are I don't know, quite a few MLS players that are getting regular call-ins, and so to see them again, I think that would prop things up a little bit, and maybe possibly you can pull another player or two that's on the fringe from Europe, like we've done in the past, and maybe give that player a one last opportunity to show you something, and who knows, who knows what that could be. For that player that maybe not playing a lot with their club, and they can get released for that window. We've seen it before, and
Yep.
I'm sure we'll see it again.
I think, to your point about the goalkeepers, there is a higher than 50% chance, maybe higher than 70% chance, all 3 goalkeepers going to the World Cup are going to be MLS goalkeepers, right? I mean, Freeze, Turner, Brady, Schulte, the only one I can think of that I would bring in is Koken, and he is, a U20 player. So that to me is like a...
Yeah, but goalkeeper is the one position where if you're playing regularly in MLS, I mean, that's fine to me.
Right. I'm just saying that this would be a good opportunity to get them in a U.S. camp. That's it. And then you add to the fact that you have... Look, Max Arson's probably going to the World Cup. Probably 2 of Tim Ream, Miles Robinson, Walker Zimmerman. God. At least Tim Ream and Miles Robinson are in the group right now. I think that's a fair assessment of their... If Pochettino has to make a 30-man list that he's choosing from, they're on that list. You've got Diego Luna. I mean, Christian Roldan is up there now. I mean, I don't love it, but there are a good number of guys who are in that. They might be going to the World Cup spot. So from that standpoint, I think it's unfortunate that they're not as a team building exercise, they're not going to have another opportunity to work with the coach. However, what has always been my issue with this camp, always, is it creates confirmation bias or selection bias, right? Where I'm going to call on these MLS. Pat Augumang is, I think, the perfect example of this. Sure, the dude can boss some not very good and talented players. You're absolutely right. He's very good at that because he is tall, he is fast, he is strong, and the dude can fire a shot off. I'm not I'm not saying he's a terrible player. But okay, he did well in these 2 games. What does that actually mean going forward, right? Kind of had a little bit with Diego Luna. We love him, but he had a really good game in January camp last year, and that was what got him more looks. And so the problem is this is a selection bias because you do not have a similar setup for European-based players. Historically, this is what Klinsmann did a couple times, and it's one of the few things that I actually agreed with Klinsmann on. That November camp was in Europe. Now U.S. Soccer can't imagine giving up a freaking window of games. That made
in a home World Cup cycle, I don't mind not giving up home games, but that's something they could have done a lot more under Greg.
That part.
Even going back to Bob Bradley, I remember in 2009, Bob Bradley, they played Denmark and Slovakia. They got smashed both times, but Bob Bradley was trying to get high-level competition before World Cup.
And so my problem is when you host basically an MLS-only camp. We've had some Liga MX guys, which look, Alex Andejas is another one that probably is going to the World Cup. Wouldn't be a bad idea to have him in camp every now and then. If you do not have a somewhat comparable camp for European players, where the goal is to find guys who maybe aren't, the inherent way you look at Camp Cupcake is that it's not going to be your top players, because your top players aren't in MLS, because of that's just, MLS is not the top league, right? Your best domestic players should be there, and you should call them in. You need to have a camp in Europe where you go, okay, well, we have our best guys. That's 15, if you will. Well, how do we fill out the rest of the 8 to 10 spots? Do we go get a guy like, and I'm missing his name. The guy who plays in Croatia for Hajduk Split, played on the U20s, and now I can't remember his name.
I could have said it if you hadn't asked.
I know.
Soto.
We all know who I'm talking about. I just cannot remember his name. And then, like a Paxton Aronson even, or Taylor Booth, or guys like that. I mean, even Jonathan Klinsman, who I don't think is in the running, but it's like those are guys who are not going to shouldn't really get called into a national team camp, like really, but need a shot at getting an actual touch point with the coaching staff. They weren't going to get that during this camp anyway, so I'm not like, I get it, during January camp anyway. But when you only have a camp like this to look at MLS players, and you do not have a similar camp for European-based players who are not at the top of the list of U.S. soccer, of USMNT players, right? Then you are inherently saying, because this always happens, oh, well, they know the system. They know the system. Well, yeah, they know the system because you called them into a January camp against a Costa Rica B team and a Croatian F team. Of course they know the system. They got a whole week and a half with you. You didn't get that opportunity to XYZ player from Europe, and to me, that's always been my problem with this camp, and it's not going to resolve itself by moving to December, and I actually think December is not the best time for it from the national team standpoint. I do agree it's probably better for it from a domestic league standpoint, because Liga MX, I think, is playing at that point in time, or about to play. They have really started their preseason, and obviously MLS is starting their preseason. So I'm not mad at like the leagues going, hey, maybe we don't do it in January when we start playing in February and all of our teams are doing preseason camp. But I think you're actually excluding even more good players if you do it in December, Lawrence, to your point. Our good players are hopefully on the better teams in our domestic league and are therefore playing soccer into November. So
yeah,
I don't know how much this decision is a good decision. I don't know how much it's a bad decision. I don't want to say I don't care, but I'm like, it just feels like I don't like it here. But we contractually have to have this many games in a window, or in a year.
Yeah, like, and it's if they had done this any other year post World Cup, I would have been like completely and totally ambivalent about it. But because they did it in a World Cup year and are costing themselves opportunities, I am, just for right now, am not in favor of it. But long term, the move to December is whatever.
Thomas, what's your succinct feeling about it?
I mean, the whole thing needs to be really evaluated in general, right? I mean, we're talking, this would have been the 30th year of unofficial Camp Cupcake. It started in 96, right? As a, hey, geez, we're having a Gold Cup. Maybe we need to have a camp before this. Wow. This is actually pretty productive. Let's have another camp, right? And then they build into it. And then once the FIFA schedule actually became consistent, sometime in the 2026 cycle, then it became an MLS sort of thing, right? And so they continued along with it, and obviously they had made deals for TV to have 2 matches, in general. But I mean, there is some. To me, every year is challenging because there's some years like, wow, this was a good camp. We got to see these players. We got I think the last one was good. We got to see Luna and a couple other players kind of have their chance and break into it. But they have to look at it differently, because you can't be calling in some old heads over and over. I mean, I know you want to have like this leadership thing when you have, former World Cup players, Zimmerman and all this stuff, but like really, what are you trying to do? Is it, to me, it's, you look at like a U21 to U23 type of window of player that's kind of like stuck, right? There's not really a lot of U23 stuff going on. They're too old now for the U20 stuff. So and they're on the fringes, right? Are they going to be able to make a move to Europe and get a look at this camp? Moving it, I don't think matters to me. I mean, if it's just end of December, they get into January, whatever. If it's a couple matches, I don't really care. I like it just because it's more soccer, but it is pretty boring a lot of times. There's not a lot of excitement surrounded around it. But if you get to a couple other stadiums of a smaller scale that you can, in different markets, why not? Like, I mean, that's the thing. Like, there's a lot of these little things that you can like build off this in general. So I don't think U.S. soccer is smart enough to really figure out how to maximize this. And there may not be a maximum. There might not be any maximum to it. I mean, it may just be what it is. And maybe they moved to California like they did for so many years, and they just live out there or down in Florida, whatever works. I mean, it's not great situation. To me, I think, with MLS schedule changing, potentially after the 2026 World Cup to be in line with Europe, where does that fit in to the scheduling then, right? Are they going to have a winter break? When's that winter break going to be? Do they want their MLS players playing, in this Camp Cupcake window? I don't know. I mean, I think there's a lot of questions involved in this, and personally, I think this may be a way for them just to kind of get rid of it altogether. They say at the end of 2026, but they could yank that pretty quickly if they don't feel comfortable with it.
Yeah, I've always agreed with you, Thomas, on like needs to just be a more youth focused camp, maybe on 25, but like definitely agree that the U23 players, and a lot of those are still in MLS for various reasons, don't have much after that U20 cycle because there's so many U20 World Cups and the U23 is only going to play once every 4 years. So I still think there's value in a camp like this. I truly do, because MLS inherently, you are going to have more young American products in MLS because that's our district league and that's where our academies are and everything. So, do you really feel like you're getting the best look of a guy? Yeah, I don't know. But it does feel like a missed opportunity to not do it in the year before World Cup, but whatever. I don't know. We have ranted and raved enough about U.S. soccer decisions this episode. We'll have more to rant and rave about next week when we break down the USMNT roster for the November friendlies, which will definitely have some controversial decisions that I'm sure people will take very calmly. Lawrence, anything coming your way that we need to be aware of? I know University of Memphis soccer is conference tournament is going on, and we got NCAA tournament coming up soon.
Yeah, so the Memphis men's season is over. Unfortunately, they had a rough year this year, and I think it's going to be back to the drawing board for Coach Mulrooney. I did have here in the last week or so an interview with on my show with Glenn Davis, the voice of the Houston Dynamo, just talking about what Houston's going to be doing, to prep for the World Cup. Talked a little bit of college soccer, so you can go check that out over on the Bluff City Media YouTube page. Coming up, like you said, the Memphis women's soccer team is the number 3 team in the country. They are the sole remaining unbeaten team in women's college soccer in this country. They have a conference tournament semifinal tomorrow, and then hopefully, if they win that, a conference tournament final on Sunday, which would, if they went out, you're looking, hopefully, fingers crossed, at a very high seed in the NCAA tournament, which could mean one or multiple home NCAA tournament games. So I'll have all those previews and news coming here in the next week or so. And then once we get towards the late stage of November, mid to early December, I'll be doing my annual year-end attendance pieces. That's U.S. men's attendance, U.S. women's attendance, Mexico's attendance in the U.S., U.S. men's TV ratings, U.S. women's TV ratings, and then I did it for the first time last year, and it's probably the most views I've got up at beyond the 90 is the American Soccer Attendance Super Table, where I rank everybody in MLS, the NWSL, the USL Championship, USL League One, and I've got somebody from USL League Two in there this year because I was able to find somebody's hint. It may or may not be Vermont Green, but we'll see.
All right, well, you can follow him on Twitter at LDoc93. Also, Bluff City Media is where he does a lot of his work. So follow Lawrence there. Thomas, anything coming up on your end?
As I mentioned, I did have a piece that kind of fall. I mean, I was writing it before it was released, but based on the venue situation, as we've talked before, and I have another little piece on Chasing the Cup as well. Just kind of breaking down the last 12 World Cups a little bit. Just a little synopsis on each World Cup and where it was hosted, and kind of what it ended up being from a kind of a result standpoint. I am working on one of a similar nature that's going to be more for the U.S. side of it. So that will probably come as we get closer to the World Cup next year in general. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm working on right now. And I had a request on the one, and actually, it's called From Maradona to Messi is what it's called on Chasing the Cup. I actually was able to whip that out in a very short period of time, which is quite rare for me. But so yeah, give that a read. And if there's anyone that ever has anything they want me to research and write on, I'm happy to do that. Some of the stuff just kind of hits me. Some stuff I've started, don't finish, and other things they drag on, and I finally, drop it out there. So, but yeah, that's what I'm working on right now. So excited to see what the roster looks like and discuss that, next week.
Oh, and I may probably have mentioned this on previous versions of the show. Starting in June of this year, I decided every book that I read is going to be American soccer specific, and that's just everything I'm reading is all the way through the World Cup. I've read several good ones. I've read a clunker. I just finished reading, I think it's American Soccer History, Culture, and Class, and it had a very interesting premise. And the number of just easily verifiable inaccuracies in there in the first two chapters of the book made me stop reading it for like 3 weeks. I couldn't. It was bad enough that I emailed one of the authors, and the publisher, and heard back from neither. Just stuff like, Germany won all 3 of their group games at the 2010 World Cup. Erroneous. They did not. There were a couple of things that they said about the U.S. men's national team that were inaccurate. Like stuff like simple as looking up what the result was. And so that was frustrating. But right now I'm reading The United States of Soccer by Phil West, and I'm about halfway through it. It's been very interesting. One of the things that I've discovered in reading all of these books is how far we've come as a soccer nation, but also how little has actually changed. And that's a very, very interesting and very frustrating dichotomy that we've made all of these strides, and I can't say that it hasn't mattered, but it almost feels like it hasn't mattered. And that's hard to explain unless you've read all of these. And also that's just the way my brain works. And my wife tells me all the time that I'm kind of weird. So
she married you. So.
She did. Lucky me.
Well, you can follow Thomas on Twitter at USKeeper, and again, check out his work at chasingacup.com. You can follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Soccer4UsPod. Thanks everyone for listening. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. I'm Bart. I'm out.